Hello, everybody. Today we're talking about Andrew Jackson in the election of 1828. Our objective question today is, why did Andrew Jackson win the election of 1828? All right, a quick reminder about what went down in the election of 1824, the one right before the election we're talking about today. Remember that for the election of 1824, the Federalist Party had gone extinct, which meant that everybody running for president was a Democratic Republican, which means that it was basically a popularity contest instead of actually about, the policies and stuff that they wanted. Because there are four people running, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, William Crawford, and Henry Clay, it's hard for anyone to get the majority. Remember, there's a difference between getting the most and getting the majority. In this case, to get the majority, you need to have more than everybody else combined. Since no one got that, the decision went to the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is led by Henry Clay. Henry Clay meets up with John Quincy Adams. They discuss over a romantic dinner, and the House of Representatives selects John Quincy Adams as president, and John Quincy Adams becomes the sixth president of the United States of America. Of course, Andrew Jackson is very upset about this. He calls it a corrupt bargain. This really shows and demonstrates to the United States that there is potentially an issue with their, selection process. The idea that instead of it being, the people voting and deciding, it's kind of like the people vote and decide, and then it later goes to the House of Representatives, and the really wealthy elite people end up making decisions. This is going to add credence to the idea that we need to, expand democracy and make voting and suffrage easier for everybody, more accessible. Which leads, of course, to the expansion of democracy we're going to see. As America grows, as we gain more territory in the West, these new territories, as they gain their statehood and stuff, want to begin to vote. A lot of states we see are going to start to lower or completely get rid of all the property requirements. So prior to this time period, you'd have to not only be a white man, but you'd also have to be, a landowner. A lot of states are going to do away with that or lower that, so more people gain suffrage. That's an important word if you're unfamiliar with. Suffrage just means right to vote. All right, so more of the United States has now opened up to suffrage, which means more people can vote, which means that democracy is going to extend. Now, if these new territories on the West and these people who used to not be able to vote but now can vote because we've lowered the requirement, clearly some candidates are going to, benefit from that more than others. Those who are, favored by the elite and stuff are going to be disadvantaged, like, for example, John Quincy Adams. And people that more your average Joe kind of person can relate to are going to benefit from this. So this is really going to help fuel Jackson's campaign and election the second time he runs. Andrew Jackson begins to be known as the common man. That's like his go-to thing. He's an average person. He doesn't like the elites. He doesn't like, the corrupt bargain, Henry Clay, all the idea of these hoity-toity people. He doesn't see himself like that. He sees himself as a common man, an average Joe, just your random guy getting through the day. That's who Andrew Jackson portrays himself to be. He truly believes that the power of the government at every single level should fall into the hands of your common man, your average Joe, your normal person. He doesn't think you have to be super elite, super famous to make decisions. Jackson truly trusts your average everyday citizen to make the proper decisions, and that's going to be very appealing to a lot of new voters. Now, I put this together, so hopefully this makes sense. This is a very overgeneralized kind of flow chart as to what the political parties are looking like. And I'm going to kind of talk really quick, rewind if you need to. Just a throwback, right? When we started talking about, the Constitution and all that stuff, before the real political parties formed, we had the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. Federalists, of course, believe that the federal government should be in a little bit more control. They believe in a loose interpretation of the Constitution. Federalists were people who pushed for the Constitution. Anti-Federalists believed in state rights. They were wary of the Constitution. They really pushed for the Bill of Rights, right? But those those were not exact political parties. The true political parties of our country don't develop until after that phase of American history, where we get the Federalists, who are, of course, the Federalists, and then the other second political party, the Democratic Republicans. The Anti-Federalists become a political party called the Democratic Republicans. Prominent Federalists include, of course, Alexander Hamilton, John Adams, technically George Washington, but we won't get into that. Democratic Republicans, popular ones of those, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, right? Cool. But then, when we get into the era of good feelings, what we see is that the Federalists die off, they lose their popularity, the War of 1812, the Hartford Convention, they basically become extinct, and almost everyone becomes a Democratic Republican. The era of good feelings, there's only one major political party, it's the Democratic Republicans. Now, part of that is because, as I have right up here in this little box right here, the Democratic Republicans become more Federalist. They adopt some of the aspects of the Federalists, and this is going to kind of just shift the party closer to your overall Federalist, and some Federalists are going to shift into the Democratic Republican Party pool. Now, there are obviously different levels of Democratic Republicans within the party, but for the most part, everybody's a Democratic Republican. Of course, there are some holdouts that are still going to be Federalists no matter what. They refuse to ever call themselves Democratic Republicans. They still exist. They don't just instantly die off because their party's gone, but there are some people who refuse to go make the switch, okay? At this time period, after the election of 1824, when Andrew Jackson gets so frustrated, he starts his own political party that we'll talk in more detail about in just a second. But those are the Jacksonian Democrats. These Jacksonian Democrats, the political party Jackson basically invents and starts and creates and keeps going, are going to look a lot more like your traditional anti-federalists. They're people who believe in, the common man, the agriculture of our country. At the same time, and we'll talk a lot more in detail about this in coming lessons, but just to put it out there, as the Jacksonian Democrats are splintering away from the Democratic Republicans, so are the other section of Democratic Republicans. These are a lot of the people who don't like where the Democrats are going, and they form their own political party called the Whigs. Now, this is a very oversimplification, but just a little flowchart so everyone remembers what's going on. Okay. So, Jackson, as I just mentioned, starts his own political party. It's called the Democratic Party. This is the very, very beginning of the modern Democratic Party. Obviously, some things change, some things shift, but this is literally the beginning of the Democratic Party that's still around today. It's going to attract the Democratic Republicans that thought that the party had gotten too federalist. Remember the era of good feelings, we kind of shifted towards federalism. Now we're going to shift back away from that again. They went a little bit too far. This election is going to be great. We're going to change the way we do things. Andrew Jackson wants to be, very approachable. He wants everyone to, think of him as his friend. And he's literally going to tour the country and have parades and barbecues. He's going to kiss babies. He's going to talk to people. He's going to invite people to the inauguration. He's going to, listen, when I win this thing, come on down to Washington, D.C. Come and hang out. Come and celebrate, right? So he's really schmoozing the average people instead of the really, really high up elite. And of course, a lot of these new Western territories and states are rooting for Jackson. He's the person they can relate to most. And as democracy increases, as suffrage increases, we're going to see in just a 4-year span an increase of 3 times the amount of voters, which is huge. Also, real quick, the Democratic Party today, its mascot is the donkey. This starts back then. We're adults here, so I'm going to put this on the screen and assume you're giggling to yourselves. Andrew Jackson's opponents called him a bad word that starts with Jack, which is, Andrew Jackson. And instead of being mad, Andrew Jackson embraced it. He goes, heck yeah, I'm one of those. In fact, yeah, just put the donkeys on all my campaign posters. And that is how the donkey becomes the mascot for the Democratic Party. Still around today. Cool. So anyway, election of 1828, what happens? We see new campaign strategies. The first are campaign songs. If you have access to the PowerPoint, please look these 2 up. These are excellent campaign songs. They're really catchy. I won't tell you which one my favorite is, but I don't think it's hard to guess. All right, another campaign strategy, we're going to start attacking the actual individual. We saw a little bit of this in the election of 1800 between Jefferson, and the original Adams, but it's going to really escalate here. Instead of making this election about policies and political issues. Instead, it's just about attacking the other person. And no one had problems with this. Andrew Jackson's going to accuse John Quincy Adams of gambling with tax money. He accuses him of buying a billiards table and putting it in the White House, which he did. But he used, Jackson says he uses government funds. John Quincy says, no, I didn't. It was my public funds, blah, blah, blah. Then Andrew Jackson says, well, that's all right. You can do whatever you want with the billiards table because you're a pimp. And everyone's like, what? Yes, Andrew Jackson and his supporters claim that the reason John Quincy Adams kept being shipped off and appointed to work in Europe is because he was finding young women for the leaders of these countries he was being assigned to hang out with. Specifically, the Tsar of Russia was accused of having John Quincy Adams procure women for him. So interesting there. I'll let you decide on that. John Quincy Adams and his supporters start attacking Andrew Jackson's wife and mother. Now, Andrew Jackson's mother had passed away already, but they called her a prostitute and stuff like that, things that were, of course, not true. But the biggest thing they go after is Rachel, which is Andrew Jackson's wife. Andrew Jackson met Rachel when she was technically still married to her first husband. Then they went and got divorced, and they accidentally got married before her first divorce was finalized. So they're saying, listen, dude, the future first lady of the country, if we elect him, is literally bigamy and stuff like that. So I mean, yeah, it was totally true, but they blew it way out of proportion. She wasn't like this evil temptress or anything. She just got her days mixed up, And this is going to cause Rachel a lot of stress, and she actually ends up passing away 3 weeks after he wins the election. And Andrew Jackson believes until the day he dies that Rachel Jackson passed away due to the mean, horrible things people said about her and what they, emotionally put her through. Great Jackson quote here, "May God Almighty forgive her murderers. I never can." Right? It's just like, whoa, okay, this guy's a little wild. Don't make an enemy out of him. So anyway, to sum it up as quickly as possible, the election of 1828, Jackson portrays himself as a common man, an average Joe, someone everyone can be friends with. He portrayed John Quincy Adams as a wealthy elitist, and he wins in a landslide. Andrew Jackson, of course, at this point in his life, is a wealthy guy too. He's technically, the elitist of the frontier, but, he was born very poor and works his way up, and that's what a lot of people on the frontier look up to. He's the hero. He's the rags to riches story that they could, maybe think could happen to them, which is why, everybody goes for it. So here we see the results. All of the frontier states, all of the southern states, and some of the northern states are going to go for Jackson. Here's some more results. This is really going to show you, dang it. Well, whatever. I'll come back to that. Jackson's inauguration, over 15,000 people show up because he had been, traveling throughout the country inviting everybody to show up. So they did. It turns into a complete rowdy party. It's like a frat house inside the White House. Andrew Jackson actually has to sneak out of a side door and then spend a night in a hotel because the party's gone so wild. People are so obsessed with, touching him and talking to him. They slam him up against a wall. He has to escape. People are jumping out of windows. It is crazy. But this shows that, he is the people's choice. The people are excited. Nobody was jumping around hugging people when John Quincy was elected, right? Maybe except for people in the house. This is a great quick video about the inauguration if you have time to watch that. Okay. Awesome story put very quickly. A man makes Andrew Jackson a 1,400 pound wheel of cheese, and it sits in the White House for years, and everyone in Washington, D.C. has to smell the rotted cheese because no one can eat that much cheese. Okay. Why was Andrew Jackson so cool? He stood up to British soldiers when he was young. He got a scar on his face. He was called Old Hickory. He was a general in, the War of 1812. He fights well in the Battle of New Orleans. He defeats the Native Americans. Let's stop there. We'll get into the fun stuff, the duels, and the assassination attempt tomorrow. I want to stop there because I want to give it some good time to talk about it. All right, that's where we'll stop. Make sure to answer your objective question. I will see you later. Bye bye.